been an interesting day for UCLA. Some good, some bad. We're going to talk about it on Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer, play-by-play broadcaster, host, podcast host, and MC. Thanks for tuning into this episode, making it your first listen every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast and available on YouTube. Become an everyday listener of the Locked On UCLA podcast. Not the normal pep in my step today to start this episode. If you're aware of the sad news regarding UCLA football, we're going to talk about that at the end of the episode. And as I see fit, this structure of the show might be a little different than you're used to, depending on how it all plays out in the recording and the editing of it. But if you're looking for a certain set of news that leads the story, I'm saving that for the end of the episode and dedicating a chunk of the end of this show to talk about it. To start, however, I'm going to talk about UCLA basketball, which is where we begin with today's show. UCLA's got a lot of transitions coming up in 23 to 24. You've got a lot of players leaving to graduation, going to the NBA draft, out of eligibility. You've got a couple of players going to the portal. A lot of ups and downs and things shaking around for Mick Cronin when it comes to, UCLA and everything in between, right? You've got the Bruins who sit here looking to fill some roster spots. They've got 3 roster spots left, potentially guys coming back, potentially another big recruit coming from overseas. But while none of that is all solidified, you do have someone in the market, which was just written from what I saw from Sam Condon, as the Bruins going after one of the better transfer players left in the portal, one of the best grad transfers available on the market, according to Sam Condon of the All Bruins Sports Illustrated site. He talked about how Cam Spencer, a current or former now Rutgers Scarlet Knight, started his career at Loyola, Maryland, not to be confused with Loyola Marymount, but Loyola, Maryland. Hit the portal on May 19th, 6'4", 205 pounds, went from Loyola, Maryland to Rutgers. And why this connection to UCLA may seem odd, it's because Ivo Simovic had already coached. Yes, Ivo Simovic, the one who's been so impactful in getting all these international recruits and changing the recruiting philosophy of sorts for Mick Cronin and UCLA Hoops. He has the connection with Cam Spencer, who initially was a 6th man at Loyola, Maryland, was a full-time starter in his junior year, just about 19 points per game, nearly 5 rebounds per game. Simovic was on staff in Loyola, Maryland. Simovic came to UCLA, and Johnson then transferred to Rutgers. They both separated from Loyola, Maryland at the same time for different reasons. First team All-Patriot League at Loyola, Maryland. Last year at Rutgers, Spencer was a 13-point per game scorer, 4 rebounds per game, 3 assists per game, 2 steals per game, 44% from the floor, 43% from 3, and an 89% free throw shooter as he started in all 34 games for the Scarlet Knights, who eventually will become a UCLA conference rival, just not in Spencer's senior season. He's a grad transfer who is getting looked at by Miami, UConn, Oklahoma, and since it's been a couple of weeks since he's hopped in the portal, now UCLA getting some ties to him from what I've read, and then Adam Zagoria of NJ.com and the New York Times is writing that Spencer is not making a decision anytime soon. What does that mean? Well, you don't want to be like one of these incoming freshmen who jumped at the chance to become a starting freshman or a starting player at a university who is all of a sudden unexpectedly or expectedly getting somebody back from the NBA draft. Or maybe there are some of these players. I mentioned a Grant Nelson in a more recent episode about he's one of those guys that's in the portal and the NBA draft combine process. So you've got those guys who may be looking to transfer, bounce back from the combine, and then change schools. Or somebody like UCLA we'll talk about in Bona and Clark those one or two of those guys may bounce back. And then if UCLA, which currently has 3 roster spots to fill, fills all their spots, then there's no space for Camp Spencer. There just isn't. But if then you have a Bona or a Clark or say a Damara who's in a different situation that does not work, he will then have an open spot. UCLA could go get Spencer, who's a scoring guard, nice shooting numbers, good defense. And remember, one of UCLA's transfers a couple years ago came from Rutgers. That was Miles Johnson. The only problem is who will the spot be open? Who will the spots be filled by? We think we know what that may mean. We'll talk about that and touch that in a moment. The scholarship cap is 13 for college basketball teams, but Spencer would be a nice addition in the backcourt for UCLA. A nice little scoring addition, 1-year stopgap, I believe, for Samovic with the connection and McCronin. And while the Bruins, I just talked about in one of the most recent episodes, Lazar Stefanovic having to be one of those players for UCLA that could step up. Spencer could easily be one of those guys for the Bruins if a couple of players or one simple guy does not come to UCLA that is expected. And we'll touch on that in just a moment. Again, Camp Spencer, about 13 points per game on a pretty decent, resurgent, the word used, of the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. And I think Spencer would make a big impact on the Bruins, although they'd love to get the guys who they have their eyes on and are expecting back. Who are those? Well, we'll tell you all that and more coming up on Locked On UCLA after I tell you about Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious snack and don't want all the calories or sugar, you've got to try Built Bar. It's healthy and it tastes amazing. 100% real chocolate, unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. 17 grams of protein, 4 grams of sugar only, and only 130 calories. You can go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club and get your specialty flavors still at Built.com. Cruising on into segment 2 of Locked On UCLA, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer with you guys, as the Bruins have some important decisions coming up for some of their basketball players. You've got Jalen Clark, Adem Bona. Those are the 2 names circled for Mick Cronin, with the NBA draft withdrawal deadline approaching rapidly. May 31st is the day that's been talked about for all too long. And while I believe they have to lock in their decision by a Thursday, I don't even know what day it is at the moment. You've got Bona and Clark. Their time is upon us. At this point, you might think these guys have made their decision. They may post it on Instagram or Twitter or whatever social media platform they prefer about some lengthy message. And it's either yes, they're coming back, or no, they're thanking UCLA for their time and then continuing the draft process as we wish them well in their professional careers. Bailey, Hawkes, Tiger, those are all guys that are either pretty much done with UCLA in terms of they've been there for so long, guys testing their status, or as Jaime Hawkes Jr. has said, I was a 4-year player, I put in my time, and it's time to move on elsewhere and become an impactful basketball player at the next level. So all the 3 names we're expecting coming up are Jalen Clark, Adem Bona, and then you've got a Damara. Those are guys reading from, I believe, an Andy Katz, from maybe even good, all these different sources. Every UCLA side, all the sources are generally expecting Jalen Clark and Adem Bona to return to UCLA. Of course, if Bona's a little healthy, someone gives him a little ring saying, hey, maybe you don't want to go back to UCLA. The big question marks for the 2 NBA players, or the 2 players going through the process, the drafting process, are what are your injuries looking like? Can you get healthy quick enough? And have we seen enough on tape to prove that you're worth waiting for, that you'll help us at the next level? For Clark, a more severe injury, a little longer recovery process. Will he be the same guy? There were some things to work on, but his defense was so elite that if he was not hurt, there would be no question he would not return to UCLA. That is my perspective in his situation. You could argue about the scoring and some, the shooting numbers, but those are things that UCLA would love to have Clark back for, because he was so impactful as the National Defensive Player of the Year, not just the Conference Defensive Player of the Year. He was maybe that missing piece. He was the missing piece that UCLA was hoping and could have maybe gone all the way with if he hadn't gotten hurt in the regular season finale. I know then if he doesn't get hurt, does Amari Bailey go off? And there's all these what ifs based on if Clark doesn't get hurt. And at this point, the biggest what if is if he comes back, if he doesn't. If he does come back, then maybe that doesn't open up a spot for Cam Spencer, because then you've got another guard-like player, although Clark can kind of guard 1 through 5. If any of these guys don't come back, that would open up, as I talked about in the beginning of the show, a spot for any potential grad transfer to come in, or any guy to come in that you're not expecting in this moment, whether it's a Grant Nelson, a Cam Spencer, whoever it may be. One of between Bona or Clark or Mara could come in. I think Clark's coming back, a more severe injury. Initially wanted that tape. We saw that coming out in early March. And now that we're at the end of May, he's making it seem like going back to school may be the way to go. Adem Bona with the labrum injury, it's a very different type of recovery. It's shorter. But for Bona, he didn't have that ceiling shown on the court that Clark had shown in his junior season. Bona, with another year of seasoning, a year of being healthy, probably would benefit from returning to UCLA one more year. I know he talked to Bruin Report Online with a video interview, and it seemed like his mind was made up at that time. He kind of said, I'm leaning one way. He just wouldn't let us into his mind and tell us which way he was leaning, whether it was one way or the other. I have an inkling. This is not with the source or anything. There's an inkling that he may come back because of his labrum injury. Maybe got told by scouts, hey, make sure you stay out of foul trouble. Show more mobility and progression offensively when you go back to the college game one more year, and then you can help. Or what could happen is a last-second change of everything that he may be asked to come. Some NBA team might say, hey, we're going to take a chance on you. You get healthy. You're so athletic as the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year that we're expecting you to come up and be an impactful player. That's a big thing. I think Clark and Bona are both coming back. From what all I've seen, that could change in a 24-hour period. Maybe their minds have switched in the last weeks, days, hours, minutes from the dropping of this podcast. I do think those two are coming. Now another question mark is Ade Amara. Is this international product actually going to come? We've been talking about him for over a month and a half since UCLA was tied to him. UCLA's now got Jan Vide. They've got Ilan Fibleul. They've got all these guys. They've lost Saka. They brought in Stefanovic, even though he's a transfer. But all these international recruits starting to be an emphasis for Mick Cronin and company. Now, if he doesn't come, that may be a spot where the Bruins go after a Nelson, the former Bison player, if he doesn't stay in the NBA draft process. Or they go small and go with a guard and end up going with Cam Spencer, the former Loyola Maryland and Rutgers player that's currently in the transfer portal as a grad transfer. Ade Amara is not so time-specific because it's not like he has to make this decision or have all these transcripts or anything that needs to be done paperwork-wise, changing everything overseas-wise on May 31st. That's not the decision that's of the utmost importance, especially since Spencer's going to take his time. Mara might take some time, and the Bruins are going to Europe to go and play with an overseas during the summer exhibition tour. So those are all things that may play into a positive reinforcement that Mara's on the way. It's just taking some time to do so, or they could shift their recruiting based on a change of plans from a Bona or a Clark. And while we're in the dark, I'm thinking UCLA knows a bit more about Clark's and Bona's thought process than we currently know publicly. I think all three of those guys are coming. That could change, and there's options out there that could easily fill those holes. But I think the best case scenario would be Bona and Clark, and if Mara is as hyped up as he is meant to be, then I think UCLA would love to have him and go big next year in a transitionary year. Those are all my thoughts for UCLA basketball, and we're just going to see how it plays out. In the meantime, we're going to take a brief pause, we're going to recollect our thoughts, and then transition into the sad news of the day as we talk about UCLA football. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll let you gather your thoughts for a moment here, and then talk about it in just a moment. Locked On UCLA, final segment. You never want to talk about these things, especially when it's as sad and as devastating as it can be. If you missed the news, I kind of talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the episode. If you haven't seen it by now, I'm pretty sure you probably have. If you've heard about it, listening, watching at home, the passing of former UCLA defensive coordinator, current assistant in administrative role in Bill McGovern. He passed away at the age of 60 early Tuesday morning on May 30th. A longtime football man, but had a battle with cancer, went 60 years old. And while we saw during stretches of UCLA season last year, he was dealing and coaching with said illness and was able to find ways to stay involved and try and be impactful in these kids' lives while battling something so life-threatening, so crushing as a cancer diagnosis that ended up taking his life way too soon. This is a guy who was only on the staff for just over a year for UCLA. And because of this illness, he had to step back and reduce his role, which is the toughest, one could say, for someone who loves football like he did. He was around football between college and NFL for 40 years, whether from his playing days when he's a Holy Cross Hall of Famer, coaching at different levels. This is what the statement from the family had to say on this very sad day. They said their goodbyes early, and we want to give all the family their prayers, their respects, and wish them well in this time of sadness, because 60 is way, way too young to go. As Bill McGovern, who is survived by his wife, Colleen, his three daughters, Amanda, Delaney, and Mackenzie, and there are currently no plans initially for a memorial service. This is what the statement said from the McGovern family. Early this morning, we said goodbye to our beloved father and husband, Bill, after his long and difficult battle with cancer came to an end today. We would like to thank the entire UCLA community for all the love and support you gave to Bill and our entire family during this difficult struggle. In particular, the McGovern family would like to thank UCLA football coach Chip Kelly and his wife Jill, as well as all the players, coaches, trainers, and support staff of the UCLA football program and their families. It was the honor of Bill's coaching career to be the defensive coordinator for the UCLA Bruins, and this past season was one of the highlights of Bill's coaching career. We are so thankful for the opportunity to be part of such a historic athletic tradition, and more importantly, we could not have made it through this past year without the love and prayers of our UCLA family. The McGovern family is so grateful and thankful to all of you for your help during this difficult time. We'll be indebted to you all forever. Thank you so much, and we'll cherish the wonderful memories we have of UCLA and our UCLA football family for the rest of our lives. It's tough to read that. It's tough to see, especially since, he was dealing with so much during the year, whether it be the criticism from myself, whether it be the criticism from everybody online about schematics. It was just, he had to battle through everything when it comes to cancer. So we wish his family and him everything. We wish them all well during this tough time, as that was certainly not the news we were expecting on this May 30th episode. So we wish all the UCLA family, everybody affected by this, well. Thoughts and prayers are with you guys. And to end this episode, rather than an 8 clap, it doesn't seem truly fitting in this moment. We'll end this show with 60 seconds of silence for Bill McGovern. So thanks for tuning into this episode. We'll talk about more UCLA stuff coming up next time.